Look at the amazing haircut.
Wow, that's what's great about this show is everybody's just cool with saying that this is a queer person. This is a queer thing. This is a queer emotion.
Sorry, but look at the haircut and the glasses. I know a dyke when I see one.
Please welcome to the stage. It's the bad feminist herself, the incredible Roxane Gay. Hi, it's lovely to see you. So, how you doing?
Oh, I'm good-ish. I mean, how are we all doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, I see that.
I'm choosing to be good.
Okay.
Now-
That's a choice.
Now, I want to ask you, so you have this essay out about your decision to become a gun owner.
Yes.
And one thing you say in the essay is that when you're backstage before events, because of the threats you've received, that you're a little more heightened. Did you feel that way just now when you came out?
No, I actually didn't, because I just felt like John's got this under control. And clearly you do.
All right. Well, that's nice to hear. I'm not sure what got you out here?
You're making that confidence diminish.
Yeah, no, for
so
sure.
fast now.
Now, have you bought your Harris Walls camo hat yet?
I am so tempted, but I don't look good in hats. That too.
Do you think you don't look good in hats, or do you think you haven't worn hats enough to be comfortable with how you look in a hat?
Oh, I'm like.
Do you think you're 1 week of hat wearing away from thinking you look good in hats? Because
No, I'm not. I'm not delusional in that way. I mean, I do have some delusions, but that's not one of them. Hats are not for me. However, I mean, look at that hat. It's so attractive. And I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. So, oh my God, go Huskers. Like Waltz, who is from the western part of the state where no one lives, but that's okay. I mean, I'm familiar with this hat. I've dated this hat.
Nice.
And it smells.
Now, I just want to can you just give people just a sense, like this is a piece where you really talk a lot about your path to becoming a gun-toting.
Well, I'm not toting it.
Well, I mean,
it's in a
rootin' tootin',
safe.
let's say.
Yes.
Gun owner, in part because of your brother who was a gun enthusiast and really encouraged you to be one. But can you just talk a little bit about why you ultimately said, despite misgivings, despite wanting more gun control, that you wanted to have a gun in your home?
Well, I didn't want to. I just had the threats keep getting more and more acute, but sometimes it's just like a random asshole on Twitter or whatever they call it now. And he's just saying words and they're mean and scary, but they're not specific. But as my career has advanced, the threats have become more specific and detailed, which lets me know this is not just someone spewing. This is someone who's doing some internet research. And it started to get alarming, especially once I started dating my now wife. And the threats started to involve her. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in the threats. And, whenever you take all of this to law enforcement, they're like, we have to wait until something happens. And that's not super comforting. And so my brother was a avid gun owner, which we didn't know where that came from. But he kept like, go get a gun, Rox, you're going to love it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm good. And finally, he kind of made the argument one time too many. And I thought, this might actually be an option. And of course, I made his life. That he was so happy. And it was, it was definitely the right decision. And of course, you can't guarantee safety. There's no such thing. It's an illusion. But I do want to rather have one and not need it than need one and not have it.
Interesting. So I just say, there's a kind of pragmatism to how you're describing it here, but in the essay, it does feel more emotional. So one thing you say in the piece is, I revel in how capable I feel. What a welcome departure it is not to be an active participant in my life instead of passively seething at all the things I cannot control. In those moments, I am not merely a weapon. I am a shield. I am not empowered. I am powerful. That's what you describe as what it feels like to have a gun. And that I know that there's practical reasons you want to have one. But can you talk a little bit about the way in which that kind of, because what that sounds to me when I see it is like, well, that would be a familiar way of describing having a gun to somebody on the right as well, not that
Well, I think
emotional
it's-
connection.
It's not I don't know that I would call it an emotional connection. Instead, I would call it, one of the things I talk about early in the essay is, I'm fairly shy and fairly passive when I probably should be more aggressive. And when I took all of this and, my brother knew some people in law enforcement, and there was this one particularly insistent guy. And when they just told me you have to wait for something to happen, that infuriated me. I don't want to just sort of wait for something to happen. No one should have to live their life being a victim and waiting. And anyone who has dealt with stalking, with threats, knows how horrible that feeling is. And for me, that was just like one time too many of being expected to sit quietly and wait and not have any sort of agency. And so I wanted agency, and I think my motivations are entirely different from someone on the right, but if they're similar, that's fine too. I guess we do have common ground after all.
And you can stand it.
Yes.
So I still feel like you're pushing, like, that you don't feel like there's that, like, obviously you have a specific set of circumstances, but when I hear people talk about the need, why they really care about gun access to, why they're really against gun control, right? And why they really believe in that kind of NRA, the NRA talking points, it's a different version of, but a similar shape to what you're saying. They're saying, I don't want to wait for somebody else to protect my family. I don't trust the government to protect my family. I don't want to wait to become a victim. I want to be in control.
Yes, but I don't believe them when they say that, because oftentimes it is the people who are the safest that also spout this rhetoric about wanting to be safe and protect their family. I'm like, bro, your family's not in any danger. And so it's not the same. And they also think it's a God-given right. And I know that it's actually a right that has been bestowed by other human beings. And frankly, it started as the purview of white men. And it was the purview of white men for quite a long time. And so I think there's a difference when black women, when people of color, when women partake of their Second Amendment rights, because for many of us, safety isn't guaranteed. It isn't the inalienable right that it is for so many of these people that shroud themselves in the Second Amendment. And I often hear them spouting this rhetoric, and it's always interesting because I just think, what on earth are you afraid of in your suburban cosseted life? Like, what do you think is going to happen? And they don't really have an answer, but I also think when you look at a lot of the conservative political rhetoric, they have decided to govern from a politic of fear. And they have decided that we are going to terrorize our electorate in the hopes that that will help us secure power. And it's manufactured, and so I try to recognize it as such.
I'm gonna just work out my thoughts because it's a
feel
thought.
free.
Really, I'm gonna work out my thoughts with you if that's okay. And tell me when I'm stupid, or don't. Just
I will.
Just think it. And, no, yeah, they'll know too. Yeah, so it's good to tell them. That there's sort of two competing truths that I was sort of feeling as I was reading this, and one was the knowledge that that if there is a gun near you, it's dangerous to you, right? That if you're going to be killed by a gun, the most likely way in which you will be hurt by it is it will be by someone you know, most likely yourself. Then after that, a partner or a friend, someone in your life, right? And you talk in the piece about the illusion of safety and control, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is, it's not just the illusion of safety and control on the outside, but of the threats that people face inside. Because on the other side of that, right, is the fact that guns have not been traditionally something that women had. And on the one hand, that has meant that women are much more likely to be killed by a partner, right? But on the other hand, there are studies that show that when a woman moves in with a man who has a gun, their rates of suicide go up. Just being around a gun goes up.
Oh, I think it's being around a man.
It could do it. could do it every time. I guess the two truths I'm trying to connect here is, on the one hand, women are at risk because they have not had the same cultural access or use of firearms. On the other hand, the presence of a gun itself is dangerous to everyone around them, even though they can't see or accept that when the gun comes in the home.
I think that life is dangerous. And yes, I do believe you have to assume a certain amount of risk when you bring a gun into a home. And so we tried to mitigate that risk as much as possible with a gun safe. My wife and I took classes, etc. And also there's no men in our house or children. So I feel much safer that way. But I'm much more afraid of the guns of policemen and policemen than I will ever be of a gun in my own house. I'm sorry, but like reality is such that I have to pick and choose what I'm afraid of. And yes, safety is an illusion, but I don't mind harboring that illusion sometimes because I think we all need to feel safe. And the gun doesn't really make me feel safe. And one of the things I write about in the essay is what really makes me feel safe is our dog. We got a pandemic puppy. And he's amazing. His name is Maximus Toretto Blueberry.
Rottweiler, I believe?
No, he's a Maltipoo.
Oh, Maltipoo. Sorry, I forgot. You're right.
He weighs
Maltipoo.
9 pounds, and he is such a vicious predator. If someone is like even dreaming about our house, this dog knows it. He and the mailman are having an impasse that I fear cannot be bridged. And so I always know, like, no matter what's going on, I know when someone's approaching the house, and that's great. And so I will say this little tiny dog makes me feel safe, but the gun doesn't make me feel unsafe.
Do you think I should get a gun?
I don't think you'll ever need one, but no, I mean, I think it depends on who you are, your level of risk tolerance, and why you think you need one. If you just want to like shoot one for fun and get one, yeah, I mean, you could, but I don't know that you seem like the type. Do you like to shoot?
Like in games,
Similar.
Like, I'll do a wizard build. And like a mage build, you'll end up having more of a ranged weapon. Sometimes I played Demon Hunter when I did Diablo 4, and that was
wow.
a ranged weapon. Those are crossbows.
You're taking me back. You are taking me back. No, I mean, I think I think that people should do what they want.
I went skeet shooting one time, but then I didn't hit any of them, and I realized I was closing the wrong eye. But I didn't think about that till I got home.
I've never tried skeet shooting, but after watching the Olympics, like, my wife and I were trying to figure out, like, what realistically can we bone up on between now and 2028 when the games are here?
Yeah.
Like, so that we can participate, clearly breakdancing. But maybe also some of that shooting because they wear the cool glasses and the girl keeps flipping him down and then she's like, and I'm like, oh. And then the one guy who doesn't use the glasses at all, I just feel like maybe I can try that.
Yeah, you just got to ask somebody which eye to close.
Yes, and I don't know that I would get it right.
And it's not the one you think.
I know, I think it's the other one.
It's the other one.
It's a lot. It's like math. No.
I just, in all seriousness, I had this moment when the assassination attempt happened. And I had this... I was sitting in my car when I saw it, and I really was like, had this sort of, my imagination just went forward. And within seconds of seeing it, the thought occurred to me that, like, you're going to want to have a gun in your house. And it went away when Kamala became the nominee.
Amazing, huh?
But, no, but sincerely, like, like, I do think that, like, you have these very real kind of threats that you faced that make it feel more logical. But it's never fully logical. It's not. No. You admit that yourself. I'm not saying anything. In the piece, you talk about how it's not fully logical. No, it's partly
definitely emotional and wanting to have control in a circumstance that you'll never truly have control in. And I think it's interesting that you bring up the assassination attempt because what that made me think was, yet again, here is evidence of why we need to ban assault weapons. And we all know not a single thing is going to happen, even though, like, these people, like their Messiah, almost lost, a piece of his ear because of a man with a gun. And so clearly people have a deep and emotional connection. But I don't find it to be defining. If someone said we're going to repeal the Second Amendment, I would be fine with it. And I would actually think everyone would be safer. And I wish that we lived in a country where such a thing was feasible, because it has happened in so many other countries. And for whatever reason, it seems to be an inherent part of the American identity.
Yeah, there's something about too the like focus on, and we've talked about this in the show before, the focus on mass shootings. There's some I think we almost prefer to talk about mass shootings than we do other forms of gun deaths, because it's an easier thing to be afraid of, because you're afraid of something that is random, not something you can control, right? So you want the government to fix it, right? But the more than half of all gun deaths are suicides, and nobody when they buy. I mean, you in this piece talk about. This is what I thought when I read the piece, that you're at the gun store and a man who is divorced and living with his parent in his 50s is buying a gun on layaway, and you know, my immediate thought is like that's the exact kind of person that's buying a gun to potentially be one of the many people in that age bracket in those circumstances that is more likely to take their own life with a gun. We also don't talk about how common gun violence is between partners or between friends, right? That's the majority of gun violence. We focus on the mass shootings, which makes us focus on the AR-15s, but you can get rid of AR-15s and we're still the most deadly place on planet Earth because of the kind of quotidian mayhem we're all accustomed to.
Yes. And I mean, there's a reason for that. It's because it's easier to point at something that's so obvious that we should get rid of. And most people, we even see this with Democratic politicians. Like, we need stricter gun laws. We need background checks. None of them ever say that we need to not own guns. And so I think it's the politically safe and the politically viable thing for people to focus on, even though we do know the statistics about gun violence. We do know that there are countless children every year that harm themselves. And it's not even only the people that die. It's the people who are grievously injured and whose lives are changed by gun violence. And yet they have to also live with that change, live with the wounds that they get from gun violence. And so, yeah, we should have a broader conversation. I just don't know how we get people to get there. And the other thing that people don't realize is that 30% of Americans, give or take, maybe 35%, own guns. But there are more guns than people in this country, which means that the people who love guns really, really love guns. And those are the people who are members of the NRA, who are always so passionate in their advocacy for gun rights. And so until we can reach those people and the more middle of the road people who are like, well, it doesn't bother me, so why not? You know, we're not really going to get anywhere. It's a problem, and I don't know how we address it.
Do you feel like you're kind of making at least your own case for why you have a gun? Like we were talking about the piece before the show, and this is the analogy somebody had, which is it's a little bit like somebody who knows how bad single-use plastic is, but they're getting a water bottle because they're thirsty and it's not so big of a deal. But then my other thought was, well, but you're asking for a straw, but you're also we're all turtles asking for straws, right? Who don't expect the turtle to end up the straw to end up in their nose.
Yes.
You know? Do you think of yourself like that?
No, I don't at all. I don't, because I just, I don't. And maybe that's delusional thinking, but I think we're all afforded some once in a while. And I feel perfectly capable, and I do not feel at risk from myself at all. But I do feel at risk from many other things, and am at risk from many other things. And so I'm kind of going to go with the devil I know.
And on the other side of that, you just talk a little bit about what we talk about in the piece about that the freedom to have a gun is not equally afforded.
No, it isn't. A great many black people either lose their lives or spend time in prison for supposedly standing their ground, which is part of the castle doctrine, that if someone enters your domain, you have the right to shoot and take their life. And this was the defense that George Zimmerman used when he killed Trayvon Martin, even though he was not in his castle. He was on the street driving his car. And yet when Marissa Alexander tried to defend herself from her abusive ex-husband who was menacing her, she spent 5 years in prison and under house arrest. And I'm forgetting his name, but there was a young man recently. He's in the Air Force. He heard someone breaking into his home. He got his gun. The police killed him. And so we are allowed technically to own guns, but that does not mean that we will not still lose our lives because we're not seen as legal gun owners. Philando Castile tells officers, I have a concealed carry permit. There's a gun in my car. He is not wielding the weapon, and still he is killed. We see this time and time and again, which is why safety really is an illusion. And so you just have to decide, what am I more worried about? The cop who might kill me for standing my ground, or the person who is sending me death threats and telling me where I'm going to be next and how they're going to get into the building, or what? And it's unfortunate that people are even put into this position where you have to make these choices. And so the problem isn't, do you own a gun or not, or what? The problem is, how do we eradicate the kinds of violence that make people think that they have to turn to guns? And people are not at all ready for that conversation. So
yeah, I do think that's the mental illness and racism and hate and isolation that leads people to be mass shooters. The just sort of acceptance of an amount of violence and violent behavior that we all live with.
We seem to be just fine with it. There is a real cultural tolerance for, oh, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And you even see people start to internalize it. Especially, I see this a lot in young women. Oh, yeah, I might get knocked around a little bit, but he loves me. Girl, no, that's not love. And this is not a new problem, but we see it all the time.
The other night, I'm dating someone.
Oh, congratulations.
It's not a big deal. And the other night, I woke up. I get up because I have to go to the bathroom. It's really dark. I kind of go into the bathroom. I open up the bathroom door. They're in the bathroom. They scream at the top of their lungs. I scream at the top of my lungs. They scream at the top of their lungs. I scream at the top of my lungs. I shouldn't have a gun. Before we let you go, here are some photos of queer people, and you should tell us if they should own a gun.
Okay.
First up, Ellen.
Oh, no.
Next up, Wanda Sykes.
Yes.
Nathan Lane.
Yes.
Okay. RuPaul.
No.
Titus Andromedon from Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, the character.
Absolutely.
I don't know. LeFou from the live-action Beauty and the Beast.
No.
Sadness from Inside Out 2.
No. Look at the amazing haircut.
Wow, that's what's great about this show is everybody's just cool with saying that this is a queer person. This is a queer thing. This is a queer emotion.
Sorry, but look at the haircut and the glasses. I know a dyke when I see one.
And finally, me, Jon Lovett. All right.
I mean, we should have led with this.
All right.
I'm excited.
All right. Thank you, Roxane. Everybody go check out Stand Your Ground and the rest of Roxane's essay series on Everland.
Thank you.
That was great.